Would you take the oath of the witness or the affirmation?
Affirmation, please.
Can you raise your right hand in the air and read the affirmation of witness before you?
I do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that the evidence I shall give before the committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. You may sit.
Thank you.
Could you just state for us, for the record, your name, your position held now with the public service, if there is one, and your last position held in public service, or positions held between 2015, 2019?
Sonia Hamblin.
Go ahead.
I am now retired. I last worked as coordinator with the Poverty Alleviation and Reduction Program. I was there for a short stint in 2013, and then for about 6 months, from January to June, I think it was, in 2015, and then returned in December 2015. I was there until I left the service in 2019.
All right, from brief stints prior to 2015. Brief stints prior to 2015.
One brief stint.
Yeah, and then from 2015 to 2019. And you serve in the same capacity all those times?
Yes, I did.
Program coordinator officially is?
The post title was just coordinator.
Coordinator. All right, anybody wants to go first? Minister Husbands, Minister Cummings, anybody online wants to go first? Yeah. Oh, you defer to me? You want to hear from me first, Ms. Hamlin? Did you have any concerns in 2015, 2019? Did you have any serious concerns about the operation of the Poverty Alleviation Program Fund?
Yes, I did. I recognize the need to address the presenting needs, the immediate needs of persons. And the program definitely had the capacity to do that to some extent. But as I looked at the cases that came before us, and as I looked at what we were really offering, I thought that the program really did not meet the real needs. And that, and I think I did express it at some times, that it seemed as though very often we were more addressing the needs of persons to whom our clients, customers, owed funds than their needs. Because there were times when we would pay an outstanding bill for them. Let's say something like rent. So by the time it's approved, etc., and goes to accounts, we are paying, let's say, down to the end of, we're in November now, to the end of September or October. What's going to happen to October bill? What's going to happen to November bill? What's going to happen to these clients in 6 months' time? And that was a major concern for me, to the point that I sought to develop a program to provide training for these persons to help them to look at stimulating and generating income. So that was for me a really big concern.
What would you say your job entailed?
As coordinator, there were two programs there. There was the administration of the Poverty Eradication Fund, and there was also the IC Braids program. So I had oversight of the management administration of those two programs, supervise the staff related to them. I would have had to deal with budgeting and how to allocate the funds to the various programs, etc.
Did you have any issue with the way funds were allocated to clients or to situations?
Generally, no. There was one instant in which I had this was for the housing program, and I had identified, based on the pool of persons needing assistance and our assessments of which were more critical, I had identified that based on the funds we had and the number of persons I thought we could assist, I had identified that we would split it up between the various agencies that submitted for our assistance. So there would have been like the National Assistance Board, the Welfare Department, and then there would have been clients from IC Braids, and then those who came directly to the requesting assistance from the Poverty Eradication Fund. And I would have recommended that we do some from each of those, and would have submitted that recommendation. A list came back, and only one person from within the grouping I submitted would have been on it. I would have been concerned. I think I wrote on the file something like alarmed that nobody from the IC Braids program, and the IC Braids program was supposed to be catering to the poorest of the poor in Barbados, a special program where we took these families and we worked with the entire family. So I was very concerned that nobody from that program was on the list.
Were you able to ascertain a reason for that?
No, I didn't ask, and so I.
So who would have made the final determination as to, with respect to your list, only one party on your list was approved for assistance? This is what you're saying. Who would have made the determination on that?
Well, what I recall noticing was that the minister had indicated the persons to be
Minister?
Yes, to be assisted.
Who would have been the permanent secretary at that time? Do you recall?
Yeah, Miss Janet Phillips.
Janet Phillips,
Yes.
permanent secretary at that time.
Yes.
And was there a deputy permanent secretary?
Should have been, and barring for case and leave or something like that, that would be Mr. Jeffrey Kelman.
Mr.
Jeffrey Kelman.
Mr. Jeffrey Kelman and Miss Janet Phillips.
Yes.
That's what you said, right? Miss Janet
Those are
Phillips.
the two names, Mrs. Janet Phillips and Mr. Jeffrey Kelman.
And who was minister?
Mr. Stephen Blackett.
The minister determined the approvals with respect to that particular set of cases?
My recollection was that he indicated those that were approved.
Okay. And that is the only circumstance in which you are aware of that minister gave such approvals? Or was this a regular, frequent happening? Was that normal?
Okay, given the time I would have been there would have been like, I would have gone in December 2015. So the years when I would have been involved with housing would have been 2016 to 2017 and 2017 to 2018. In the following year, there was a meeting in which the minister, the PS, the deputy PS, myself, the project officer with the IC base, and the field investigator who works with the Poverty Eradication Fund would have sat down and looked at the names. So that would have been, yes, different.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to follow on with that line of querying. On page 64 of the report, paragraph 4.29, this is prior to your time. I'm going to read it out loud for the benefit of those who are following. It says, recommendations for assistance to individuals and groups were forwarded to the committee for approval on a monthly basis. When the committee was in place, it considered requests from individuals whose household income levels fell below the poverty line. The committee was disbanded in financial year 2008 to 2009. Subsequently, recommendations for assistance were sent to the minister of the then Ministry of Social Care and or permanent secretary for approval. The Bureau was phased out in July 2009. So this would have been prior to your time. Would you be in a position to advise us on what then you found by 2016, 2017? Because if this was the state of play as at 2008, 2009, where recommendations were sent to the minister or to the permanent secretary for approval and no longer to a committee, by the time you joined in 2016, 2017, was this still happening?
My understanding was that the recommendations were sent to...
For the record, Minister Cummings, which page did you say? 64?
Page 64, the top of page 64, under Poverty Eradication Fund, paragraph 4.29.
Page 64.
I'm looking at it in the online version, so it may probably appear differently in the printed version. I'm sorry.
How much? Page 56. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, recommendations were submitted to the PS, 3 copies, and my understanding was that there were 3 copies, one for the minister, one for the PS, and one for the deputy PS.
So just to be clear, between the period 2008 to 2009 and 2016, 2017, rather than going to a committee, applications for assistance were sent to the minister and or the permanent secretary, and in the 3 copies that you have just outlined.
That is my understanding of what was happening. They would have been sent to the permanent secretary in 2016 to 17 with the 3 copies.
Anything?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My question has to do with the process. We were trying to understand the flow that investigations are done in the field. So if you could start from a request coming in and tell us what you know of the step-by-step process.
The requests may come in various formats. Some came by referral from other agencies. Some came by a telephone call, and some came by persons walking in. If persons walked in and the field investigator was available, She would see them and she would conduct an interview with them at that point.
At that time, how many field investigators you had?
One.
One, okay. Go ahead.
If a telephone call was made, then she would set up an appointment to meet with the person and conduct that interview. When other agencies made referrals, they would normally have conducted an interview. Well, there were two main agencies that submitted. I think in one case they would send a referral, the documented interview, and I think in the other case only a list came. The interview having been conducted on some occasions, I cannot say on all, but that's possible. But on some occasions, a site visit would be made to the home to see further what the circumstances were there. And then the field investigator would document the referral. Those will be submitted to the coordinator, that's me, and I would go through them on my own. Those for which I had queries, I would meet with her on, point out the queries, some of which she could answer at the time, others she would have had to get back to the client and would do so. Following that, the documents were finalized. I would check for the adjustments that I would have discussed, and a package was then prepared for submission with the recommendations.
And that recommendation would go to the PS, the DPS, and the minister.
The recommendation was in the documents that were prepared, and yes, those documents would have been submitted to the PS, 3 copies, with the understanding that that's what was happening.
Okay. And the submissions that you made over the period, what, just a rough estimate, would they be generally accepted, or there was difference in approvals?
They were generally accepted. There were times when, I'm pretty sure, when there may have been a reduction in the amount approved or an increase in the amount approved. There would have been cases where recommendations where that we did. A case where we did not recommend approval, they may have approved, and there will be cases where we have recommended approval and they did not approve it. But those were in the minority.
Minority. Were there any that were of concern to you, that you felt that this definitely needed support, or the other way around, that you really did not think this met the criteria? In cases like that where there was that variance, were explanations given to you that then satisfied you with why there was a variance?
There was one case where that the field investigator, she felt very strongly about it. It was, she had recommended approval. We had recommended approval, and it was not approved. And she came to me about it, and I went to that set was approved by the deputy PS. I'm not sure whether he would have been in the position of deputy PS or acting PS at the time. That's where it was just now. But by Mr. Cameron. And he gave us an audience, he took us around, and she put her case, explained why she thought what she did. He did indicate why he had not approved it. He was looking at the age of the person, but she spoke more to the condition of the person. And he said he will be guided by what she said, and he changed to recommend the position. So it was eventually approved.
Okay, so generally you were not dissatisfied with when variance occurred between your assessments and the decision then that was taken by the minister or the PS or deputy PS. Generally it was okay.
Generally, I could live with it.
You could live with
Yes, it wasn't one where I went away distressed, no.
Okay. We were told in the audit that there were 32 dispersals, agreements to provide support for which assessments could not be found. Did any of that occur within the period that you were coordinator? Were you aware of anything of that nature?
No, I am not aware of any such thing happening. I looked at it and I said, this can't be accurate. This is just a case of they're not asking the bring this to the attention of the field investigator who would go and locate the missing documents. I can't see that happening. It's just not something I can visualize.
Okay. So in your mind, that would more be a situation of the documents not being able to be found and attached to the application, as opposed to some other track that was running unknown to you, where people were coming in and getting stuff without necessarily going through the process.
In my opinion, it would be a case of the information not being seen by the audit. I'm not even thinking that, well, they're probably not on the appropriate file, otherwise it should have been seen. But I'm not even thinking of them being misplaced. I'm more thinking of something where they took copies, one with the sign off, that should go on this file, that goes to accounts. The other one goes on some other location, and the one went on. So then you go to the other location to check to see what's happening. That's the only thing that would seem to make sense to me.
So in a case like that, you're sharing with us now that there are actually two records, one that went to accounts and then another file that had the duplicate information. So in an audit, at least one with its documentation should have been available or should be intact. Would that be a reasonable expectation? Both couldn't be missing?
No, both couldn't be missing. Because of the nature of the work we did, there would be records with some particulars about the individuals. that record was not sent to the accounts department. The accounts department would get the information that the accounts department needed. Name, address, nature of payment, amount approved, beneficiary, that type of information. Along with that must be the sign-off of the approval. I am thinking, and I didn't think this through before, but I'm thinking that there could have been a situation of the wrong copy going on the file. There could have been a situation, I think I would have remembered some, where the PS signed the wrong copy, in which case once we picked it up, and we would have taken it back to her and had the signatures done correctly. I'm thinking for a 30-something, it must be something like that. I can't envisage how
Something like that would occur.
30-something, not 30-something. If you told me 2, I could say, okay, perhaps there was an emergency and somebody forgot to get all the documentation tidied up afterwards, but not 36, not 30-something.
Right. So in your experience then, you did not see or were aware of improper administration in terms of not having those assessments and so on attached to an application and an application actually being approved. That was not part of your knowledge except from this report.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Minister Husbands. I think Minister Cummins wants to ask a question. Then perhaps we have a last question to you.
Yes.
I don't see any hands online asking for the floor. Yes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your candor and the level of responses that you've been giving so far. I do have a couple of follow-up questions, though. So if it is that there are applications being submitted by the methodology that you have just outlined, using the process that you have just outlined, to the parties that you have just outlined, could you tell me what your understanding was of the criteria being used for selection of individuals? Because if we were to go on the basis of what is written in the Auditor General's report, it says that there was an absence of approved criteria. What criteria was being used to the best of your knowledge?
There was a general assessment of the individual making the application, the household, the living and nutritional conditions, etc. But there was a key thing, and it was almost always noted in the summary and analysis. And this was whether or not the person fell above or below the poverty line. There is a poverty line and there is a vulnerability line. And those are the things that I would have focused on in assessing the documentation that came from the field investigator, along with other information. There were times when there may be other factors to help to guide the decision or impact on the decision, but whether or not the person fell above or below the poverty line was a key evaluation determination.
So it is your assessment then that, notwithstanding the points made by Minister Husbands that it is doubtful the circumstances under which over 30 applications could have been approved without some clarity as to how that was done, that you had a set of criteria, general criteria, even if they were not written, that was used to determine if the person fell below the poverty line or so on. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so if I can follow on then, Chairman, what would then have been the basis, the criteria being used for disbursements from the fund to cover the following areas? Disbursements for mortgage arrears, a marriage seminar, and sponsorship of shows. What criteria would have been used to determine disbursements that fit those criteria as found by the Auditor General?
Okay. In terms of mortgage, I remember dealing with one. I don't remember all the details of the household, but I do remember that the applicant was ill and unable to work. She had an illness that we might consider to be a terminal illness. But some persons have had remission, and it was a mortgage. My understanding within social work is that we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with the whole person. And my understanding of the program was that we were paying rent. Rent was only paid by anybody to provide housing. We were doing housing repairs. You only repair a house if you intend to occupy it for housing. Persons who do not pay rent and do not have the privilege of being fully owning their home, or having the privilege to live in a home that somebody else is seeing after and they're living free, then have a mortgage. It is for the same reason, provide housing. In my opinion, one of the three basic necessities: food, clothing, and housing. Under the said ministry, we had the welfare department as well, paying rent, monthly rent for clients. I looked at this situation and I said, this person has a home. If they can maintain and keep their home, then they wouldn't have to look to pay rent. And if they are not working, they will not be able to pay rent. So then they end up at welfare department, who then pays rent. What is the spirit of this fund? Why in a situation like this, and where the person is not working now, cannot work right now, and will be really stressed by continual calls to pay the mortgage, which does not help, even if it's just a cut on your finger, anybody continually coming at you does not help. So her health, in my opinion, would also be under threat. I thought to myself, I can't see any reason why a fund that can pay rent, can do housing repairs, in an extenuating circumstance, that's how it looked to me, like this, couldn't offer some assistance here. It seemed to be catering to the same need. And so I would have put a case to the PS, explaining why I think it should be considered. What I also did in that case, because the mortgage was with a credit union, I thought to myself, no, as far as I understand, credit unions are about members. You have a member in this situation, can't you offer some kind of relief and we would have pursued that route as well, and the response was that they couldn't. It is a sore point for me, though. It really is a sore point as a credit union member. As a member of anything, if you're a member of whatever, if you're all members of something, and you can't help another in need, then I don't know why you need to be a member of whatever or with you. That's how I feel. So it's really left a bad taste in my mouth. So extenuating circumstances like that, regardless of what it was, if that's what I saw, I would put the case, it would go to DPS, and they would make a decision.
So, Chairman, thank you very much for that. I think it's a well-made argument, and I appreciate your candor again. What would be your position then on the provision of funds disbursed under poverty alleviation for a marriage seminar or sponsorship of shows?
All right, I didn't, as far as I can recall, I remember seeing it on file, but I don't think it would have come in my time. I therefore can't speak to the specifics of what was done there, but I would say a couple of things generally. I remember when I started my social work training in Jamaica, the head of the social work department said, all problems are problems in relationships. All problems are problems in relationships. So if, and I've seen it in many situations, in dealing with poor persons, one of the things that always alarmed me was when you start checking, there's nobody. There's nobody. There's nobody. No neighbor, no relative, nobody. So I can't speak to that, but if we're going to address some issues, relationships need to be addressed as well.
So I hear that, but my query to you still remains, because the purpose of the fund has very clear and defined criteria. There are other mechanisms within the apparatus of government across the various ministries, within this ministry and outside of this ministry, that can treat to some of those other issues, but I am not clear, based even on your explanation, which has really been appreciated, that the requirements for disbursements for the fund and the criteria being met under the fund would incorporate those latter two issues, or even in principle the first one. But I could accept your housing recommendation. But on what basis under this particular mechanism for support would there be those additional types of activities funded? And by what criteria? General comments are appreciated, even because I appreciate you said that it would not have come to your attention specifically.
All right, thank you. Two questions before you go, Ms. Hamlin. The DPS, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, at the time you were there, the last 2015, 2019, you said, would have been who?
Mr. Jeffrey Kalman.
I thought you mentioned two.
Deputy Permanent Secretary?
I thought you mentioned two DPSs.
No, I only mentioned one.
All right.
Actually, when I left, Miss Wiltshire Care was acting.
Miss?
Wiltshire Care was acting. Jacqueline
Yes.
Wiltshire Care, she was acting.
Thank you. Final question. Are you May born?
Am I?
May born. Born in May.
Are you seeing the 11th of May occurring as my date of birth?
Is
I
that-
saw it on one occasion and I thought I had it corrected.
What is the correct date?
I'm born on the 5th of November, as
November.
I would have indicated in relation to last Friday.
All right. No, I didn't see it anywhere. Just you seem to have the heart of a May-born person.
Okay. I have seen the 11th of May, but if I remember correctly, that was in Canada. And I concluded it was because they could not read the metric form of date.
Writing the dates, yes. Well, we thank you, Ms. Hamlin. I don't see anybody. Senator Drakes, yes.
Yes, quickly, Chair, because I know we don't want to go too long this afternoon. I just have one question for Ms. Hamlin. Ms. Hamlin, based on the Auditor General's report in section 4.40, it states the audit observed that there was no formalized system for following up on the assistance provided to ensure that the reduction in or alleviation of poverty was indeed being realized through these programs. In addition, no evidence was provided to indicate that the ministry confirmed that the amounts were spent for the intended purpose. Based on what you have been providing us this afternoon, was there any at least an informal process after these cases were approved where there was some type of follow-up when you were the coordinator?
The process, as I recall, was that groups getting a reasonable sum of money. I do recall we may have made disbursements of less than $500 to a few groups, one or two groups. But, you know, groups getting over that were required to submit reports. And those, I have seen reports, I have gone through them, I have had discussions with persons about things in the reports. And some of the groups that received funds, I have visited them and had discussions with them. We had meetings in the office with one, at least one. So I was a little bit surprised about no follow-up because reports, we required the reports before they could request funding again. Well, sorry, before we would disperse, submit for approval, recommend funding again. So, you know, I mean, I might, if the request is there and circumstances allow, I might start to analyze it, but nothing would happen before reports came in.
Thank you, Ms. Hamlin.
Thank you, Ms. Hamlin. We
Sure.
have kept you a bit over time, I think, but
Chair, just one quick question.
make it quick and brief.
Very, very quick. We talked about the 36 cases that hadn't been signed by the Minister or the PS, but there were also 122 cases that no assessments were found for them, that no assessment was done.
That
Same
one-
issue?
That one again, I'm at a loss. You may recall I said earlier that one of the agencies, I don't think, sent the assessments. I don't know if some, but 126 of the sample. It's more than a third of the sample. That doesn't sound like that would represent 126 out of 300 and something. But since one agency did not send the assessments, well then it is possible that there could have been some without
That did not
assessments.
have.
You know, that's from looking at it logically.
Okay,
But
so that would
the
be-
agencies would have done the assessment.
Right, so where referrals came from another agency, they may not have sent the assessment. And you all would not redo the assessment.
No, we will not. We want the
So
investigator, no.
what was the basis on which the decision was made? If the assessment didn't come and the name and the application came, Do you know how, would it come to you or does it go straight to the PS?
They would all
minister?
have come through me.
Mhm.
So they would have gone first to the field investigator and then come to me. I really cannot recall the nature of the information that would have come. There would have been, there should have been some type of cover letter with the information. I'm not sure what else was in there. I can't recall at this point. But
Would there be some form of collaboration between you and the
I have.
agency, a discussion on it?
I have had discussions with agencies about some matters. It was not on all. These were social work agencies where social workers would have done the assessments as well. But I know there was some where I had a query and I would have contacted and had discussion.
But you can't say for certain what was the basis on which you made the determination that it would go up for approval. If it came from a unit, was referred, it comes through you before it gets to the PS. There's no written assessment. You may or may not call.
Right. It would have been on the recommendation of that agency.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Minister Husbands. Thank you, Ms. Hamblin.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we'll take a break of a couple of minutes to allow for the cleaning staff to sanitize the area there. Witnesses, take a few minutes break.